Turns out I used to work in the University of Utah Neuropsychiatric Institute, and we called sleep God's therapy. And this had nothing to do with religion. It just had everything to do with, often by the time people made it to the unit that I worked on, they had maybe not slept for days, or their sleep has been highly disrupted. And the very first thing we do when someone gets into that acute state is find a way to help them get sleep. Our brains need sleep. They need that time to recover. So the way that the brain operates is through like neurotransmitter transmission that requires a lot of energy. So to produce neurotransmitters, to get them through the cell bodies, to get the neurochemical impulses going, this takes a lot of energy to do this. And sleep is when the brain does its very best at regenerating, cleaning up, getting ready for the next cycle. So if sleep is not happening, almost all symptoms of anxiety and depression or trauma are going to be further aggravated. So finding a way to get sleep, and this is kind of one of those catch-22s. Am I depressed or anxious because I'm not getting sleep? Or am I not getting enough sleep because I'm depressed or anxious? And so it goes both directions. But we can actually start either way at this and begin to affect our sleep hygiene. There's strategies that we know work really well for a lot of people. So this is a very busy slide. You don't need to read it all right now. We're going to go through each one of them. But there's 11 basic strategies based in the research of things to do if you're not sleeping well. Again, this is important. If you're sleeping well, you don't necessarily need to do these. They might not be any more effective than what you're doing. But if you are struggling with sleep, then these are strategies that might help you begin to get your sleep more in order. So the first one is, we've talked about this before, your brain is a master associator. It is able to take one thing and connect it with the other one really quickly. And so it likes to do this to shortcut, to speed up your life so you don't have to think so much about things. So if you could imagine, if you're laying in bed for hours, staring at a ceiling and tossing and turning, what your brain is recording at the non-conscious level is that your bed is not for sleep. Your bed is for anxious worrying. Your bed is for like tossing and turning, maybe resting but not sleeping. Your brain actually does this again. It's non-conscious level. You know you're supposed to be sleeping, but sometimes the non-conscious regions just make this association. Oh, when we're in this location on this particular mattress, it means it's time to start thinking about everything bad that happened today or everything that might go wrong tomorrow. So one of the most effective strategies at sleep hygiene is never stay in bed if you're not asleep within 20 minutes. That is, get out of bed, go somewhere else, a chair, somewhere. This is hard. I know college students are like, I can't, I have a roommate, or I can't go out into the living room. And if there's any way, maybe it's just find a way to lay down on the floor instead of your bed. But what we want to do is we want to break this connection between your brain being too busy to sleep and your bed. We want to separate those two. So if you haven't fallen asleep within 20 minutes, get out of bed. Find a different place, a place on the floor or living room or somewhere else. Pace, find something, but don't stay in bed. We want to break that association. So just make your bed just for sleeping, right? That's what it's for. You shouldn't even really use it for resting. If you're tired, lay down somewhere else. What we're looking for is when you're actually sleepy. That's what we want your brain associating with your bed. And there's lots of research on this. The next one, and it's highly related, is only go to bed when you're sleepy. And there's a huge difference between being exhausted and tired and sleepy. Right? Sometimes this is called, well, I'm exhausted and tired. I'm tired and wired. That is not sleepy. It's not a good time to go lay down on your bed when you're tired and wired. Find a different place to try and relax. Only go to your bed when you're actually having a hard time staying awake. That's what we want your brain to associate with your bed, is that actual sleepiness. And your brain will do this. Now, again, this is not overnight. I encourage you, whatever strategies you're using, practice it for at least 3 weeks. But practicing it every day, whatever strategy you decide to use, or a couple of them, give it 3 weeks, give it time for your brain to redevelop these healthy associations. Another strategy is to always wake up at the same time. So when they do sleep studies, they find that for many people, the most effective way to regulate sleep is not to try and go to bed at the same time every night, but rather getting up at the same time every morning. And what this can do is this can really reset the internal clocks in the body. If your brain knows we're going to wake up at whatever hour of the day it is, 5:30 or 7 or 9, whatever your wake up time is, but waking up at the same time every morning, this, unfortunately, this also includes weekends, but getting your brain to know that, hey, it's this time and we get up, that's very, very helpful. If you have shift work of some sort, this is really hard to do because your shift is probably always changing. But as best you can, wake up at the same time every morning. And the research shows that that is usually a more effective strategy than trying to get to bed at the same time every night. Eventually, your body's going to say, we need to go to bed, we're tired. Start with getting up in the morning at the same time and try and avoid the snooze button. Right now we're back to that unhelpful association. That snooze button creates this kind of this hypo sleep kind of situation where it's, for some people, very pleasant, and so they just want to stay in bed even more. And what we want to do is break that. So again, if you're not having struggles and you like to hit the snooze button, I know people who love to hit snooze. They actually plan their day around hitting the snooze button 4 or 5 times. They know they're going to snooze and they enjoy it, and that's fine, but they don't have sleep problems. I'm talking about people who are having sleep issues. Then maybe consider getting up at the same time and never using the snooze button. Another one is, particularly if your problem is you lay in bed and your brain immediately starts thinking of everything you have to do tomorrow. Right? So in other words, your brain has begun to associate, okay, we're laying on this bed. This is the thinking bed. This is our planning bed. Again, we've talked about, we want to start breaking that. One of the strategies you can use is to start building up a relationship with your own brain. Take a notebook, and this is very literal. So find a notebook somewhere, find something to write on, and as your brain comes up with, okay, tomorrow we've got to do this and this and this, write those down. Or if they're just worries that are coming up, oh, well, what about these things? Write down all of those worries. And what you're going to do is promise your brain that the next morning, when the alarm clock goes off, you're going to pick up your list of things to worry about, and you're going to deliberately begin worrying in the morning. And this sounds kind of silly, but what you're doing is you're going to train your own brain. You're going to build up this relationship with your own brain, a relationship of trust, that you will keep your word. If you say you're going to worry about something, you'll do it. So, and this is one that you'll need to probably stick with for 2 or 3 weeks to see if it works out for you. But as you head to bed, or before you head to bed, just start making a literal list of everything you're worried about, that your brain wants to worry about, and promise your brain you'll pick the list up and worry about it in the morning. And you need to follow through with that, by the way. Don't try and psych yourself out or trick your brain. I say I'm going to look at it, but I'm not. Your brain knows better. So it really is important that in the morning you pick up your list and you start going through the list and start worrying about everything you promised your brain you'd worry about. And we've already talked about this. This is another really good way to develop your anterior cingulate cortex. You're going to develop that relationship between your conscious self, your frontal lobes, and your limbic system. You're going to do lots of firing during this exercise. You're saying, hey, brain, I promise we'll worry about these things later. And then you keep your word. It works with other people. If they know that we will follow through with our word, they're more likely to accept our word. And our Our non-conscious self is very similar to that. Another one is if you happen to have nightmares, and now I want to be careful here. I'm not talking about PTSD necessarily. If you're experiencing PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and especially at a very severe level, you probably need to be consulting with a professional before you jump into this kind of thing. This is research done with people it was mostly veterans at the VA hospital, where it turned out people who struggled with nightmares, they did this thing they called imagery rehearsal therapy. And it's so easy that most people dismiss it. They think, oh, that's ridiculous. That won't, I've struggled with nightmares for years. You can't possibly tell me that if I do 3 things every night, that's going to fix my nightmares. What they found with the research at the VA hospital was it was incredibly effective. In fact, I'm not sure they have anything more effective than these 3 strategies. So if nightmares tend to be the thing that keep you from sleeping, you might want to look into this. And here's the basic steps. The 3 steps of imagery rehearsal therapy is just jot down a brief description of a recent nightmare. Right? And by the way, if this is too upsetting for you, don't jot it down, but pick a different one. But find it, jot it down, this nightmare that you're having, and then just think of a way to change it. I'm not going to tell you how to change it. You think of a way to change the nightmare. And then spend a few moments each day imagining this alternative version of your nightmare. Probably some altered in some way, but you decide what that is. And that's it. And do this for 3 weeks and see what happens. The research is pretty astounding that something so simple as just jotting down a description, thinking about how you want to change it, and then imagining that change happening in your dream a little bit each day, just thinking about it, turns out to be incredibly effective. In fact, it was able to decrease significantly veterans' issues with PTSD, because one of the strong components is a lot of nightmares from their wartime in this instance, because we're working with veterans. But it's a very effective strategy for managing nightmares. And you can always pop online and find this research really easily. So Krakow and Harris and imagery rehearsal therapy, if you want to learn more about it, there's some really amazing research on it. Very effective, better than medications, better than other kinds of therapy for nightmares. Another one is do not tell yourself that you must sleep. Probably many of you have experienced this at some time or the other. You know that, oh, I've got this very important thing happening tomorrow. I got to make sure that I'm ready for it. I've got to get enough sleep. And now you're set up and all you can think about all night is, oh no, I'm not sleeping. I really need to get this sleep. And this is what we call the paradoxical mind effect to the brain. It's your brain doing what it's supposed to be doing. But the moment we have a rule that we have to do something or we're forbidden from something else, the moment that happens, we're now set up, right? Because now we have this rule floating around in our head to see if we're keeping the rule. So if the rule is, I must sleep and there's something wrong if I'm not, now I've got this rule hovering around looking for any evidence that I'm not sleeping. But that very activity in the cognitive processes hyper alerts the brain, making it now impossible to go to sleep. So find a way to not set up a rule where you must sleep or the world's going to end if I don't sleep. The moment we do that, we set up this paradoxical effect and making it much more unlikely that we'll be able to fall asleep. So allow your mind to focus on something else. This is where you can do something like progressive relaxation or some sort of other exercise. Get your mind off of whether or not you're not sleeping. Just do something else. Distract yourself a little bit. And then if your body's sleepy, your body will take itself off to sleep. So find something to do. Find something, maybe a non-stimulating something to read. It doesn't get you too activated in your imagination, just interesting but not too exciting. Again, just distract yourself enough that your brain can then take you off to sleep. Avoiding naps, again, not for everybody. If you're having struggles with sleeping during the day can really upset the rhythms in your body. So if you're having sleep hygiene issues, consider avoiding naps. You'll be really tired and sleepy during the day, but that's okay. What we want to do is to train your brain that daylight hours are not for sleeping. Sleeping is for when the sun's down, something like that, but avoid naps. Another thing to remember is there isn't the right number of hours for everybody. It seems like for most people on average, it's around 8 hours. That's true. The science says, yeah, that's pretty good for most people. But very healthy people function anywhere from 6 hours to 10 hours and then anywhere in between. So don't get too worried or caught up in, oh no, I'm not getting 8, I must not be healthy. Maybe you're one of those that operates just fine on 6 or 7 hours. Or don't get too worried that, I really need my 9 or 10 hours. That's okay. Very healthy people. Some of them need 9 or 10 hours also. Find the one that works for you. And probably the best way to do that is to keep a sleep journal and kind of keep track of how do I feel after so many hours of sleep. Another one is to avoid screen time or any exercise or certain substances like stimulants, caffeine before bed, right? Because all those activities tend to get the brain activated. They prevent the brainstem from producing the neurochemicals we need to go to sleep. So screen time is particularly difficult for that. So one, keep all screens way away from your bed. Again, we don't want your brain associating bedtime with movie time or bedtime with watching the news. Keep that away. But also the light itself is stimulating for the brain. The brain is defaulted or should be defaulted when there's light. It's time to be awake. So making sure that you're avoiding screen time or exercise or those substances before bed. If your sleep problems are persisting, make sure you get a medical checkup. There are some medical reasons that you might not be sleeping, and at least rule those out before you just automatically assume, oh no, this is just psychology and I just need certain tricks and I'll be able to get to sleep. Make sure that you really are medically in order, that you don't have something like a thyroid deficiency or some other issue going on. Make sure that you've been checked out. And sometimes sleep studies, if your insurance allows for it, or there's some apps now on phones that can monitor how much do you move during your sleep, those kind of things. But see if you can discover if there's something else besides just psychological or emotional issues that are keeping you awake at night. And another one is sleep is rarely an emergency. So while you might not be getting enough sleep and it is detrimental to you through time to not get enough sleep, it's not an immediate emergency. So find new strategies and be okay with it taking some amount of time to begin to get better at those strategies. So there's actually one strategy, falling asleep fast. So this is Bud Winters. He wrote a book, Relax and Win, just full of some really interesting stuff. But it turns out falling asleep fast is actually a skill that can be learned by almost everybody. So just like any other skill, playing a musical instrument is a skill. Playing some sort of sport is a skill, and it takes development. He actually found a way to help people, pilots in this instance, I think it was World War I or II, I can't remember which one it was, but they actually trained pilots how to fall asleep within 2 minutes. And within 2 months, I think 98% of them were able to fall asleep on demand. No matter how loud the environment was, they learned how to fall asleep quickly. And it turns out almost all of us are capable. And those who can't fall asleep within 2 minutes were still able to fall asleep within 2 to 5 minutes. So it wasn't like the others couldn't. It just took a little bit longer. But it's a skill. Falling asleep is a skill and it can be learned. And if you want to learn more about that, You can get Relax and Win, or just type in Bud Winters and Falling Asleep Fast. It's all over the internet, the strategies. But the book is really interesting too, if you ever want to pick that up. But these are just ways to make sure we're getting sleep. We need the sleep in order to get the frontal lobes healing from its daily work and to replenish itself. If we're not getting sleep, we're going to likely struggle with almost all other emotional health issues.